call came at 3 a.m. Ashley had just returned from her third deployment in Afghanistan, her uniform still smelling of desert dust and diesel fuel. The voice on the other end was barely a whisper, her grandmother, struggling to breathe, alone in a house that should have been filled with family. While Ashley was dodging bullets overseas, her relatives were posting sunset photos from their Hawaiian vacation. The same relatives who had promised to care for the woman who raised half of them. The same people who were supposed to be family. But when Ashley rushed to that house and saw what they had done, or rather what they hadn't done, she realized the real war was just beginning. 'Cause what she discovered in those medical records, those bank statements, and those hidden documents would expose a betrayal so deep, it would tear her family apart forever. And the weapon they used against a dying woman? It was something none of them saw coming. Before we dive into this shocking story, make sure to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from our viewers around the world. Ashley had spent 18 months treating wounded soldiers in the dusty corridors of a field hospital in Iraq. As a combat medic, she'd seen things that would haunt most people forever. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for what she'd find when she came home. Her grandmother had been the anchor of their family for decades. When Ashley's parents went through their bitter divorce, it was Grandma who kept her fed and safe. When Ashley struggled in school, Grandma stayed up nights helping with homework. When everyone else said the military wasn't for women, Grandma was the one who drove her to the recruitment office and said, "Show them what you're made of." Grandma had worked 3 jobs to keep the family afloat after Grandpa died. She'd put Ashley's brother through college, helped her sister with her mortgage, and never asked for anything in return except that they'd be there when she needed them. The family had always been complicated. Ashley's brother felt entitled to everything: Grandma's money, her house, her attention. Her parents had grown distant over the years, more interested in their own problems than checking on the woman who'd sacrificed everything for them. Money was always tight, and somehow Grandma was always the one bailing everyone out. When Ashley deployed, she thought her family had everything covered. Regular phone calls home assured her that Grandma was fine, healthy, surrounded by love. She was wrong. The house felt wrong the moment Ashley stepped through the front door. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, suffocating. No television humming in the background, no smell of Grandma's famous soup simmering on the stove. Just an oppressive quiet that made her skin crawl. She found her grandmother in the back bedroom, barely recognizable. The woman who had once lifted Ashley onto her shoulders at county fairs now looked like she weighed 90 pounds soaking wet. Her cheekbones jutted out sharply, her clothes hung loose, and her breathing was shallow and labored. Ashley rushed to the kitchen, expecting to find it stocked with groceries, medications lined up on the counter like soldiers. Instead, she found empty cabinets, a refrigerator with nothing but expired milk and moldy leftovers. Pill organizer that used to be meticulously filled sat empty on the windowsill. Meanwhile, her phone buzzed with notifications. Instagram posts, Facebook updates. Her parents, her brother, her cousins, all of them grinning in matching Hawaiian shirts, cocktails in hand, sunset behind them. Posted just hours ago. They were living it up in paradise while the woman who raised them was wasting away in a house that felt more like a tomb than a home. That's when Ashley realized the horrifying truth. Her family hadn't just neglected Grandma. They had abandoned her to die. Ashley couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. This wasn't just neglect, the pieces didn't add up. She started digging, and what she found made her blood run cold. First, the medical bills. Stacks of them piled high on Grandma's kitchen table, all stamped with red overdue notices. Heart medication, blood pressure pills, oxygen tank rentals, thousands of dollars in unpaid expenses. But here's the thing that didn't make sense. Ashley knew her family had money. Her brother had just bought a brand new truck. Her parents had renovated their entire kitchen 6 months ago. Her cousin was posting photos from expensive restaurants every weekend. So why were Grandma's essential medications going unpaid? Ashley pulled up her grandmother's bank statements online, using the login information Grandma had given her years ago for emergencies. What she saw made her hands shake. The account that used to have a comfortable cushion, money Grandma had saved from decades of working multiple jobs, was nearly empty. Not just low, nearly zero. But the withdrawals told a different story. Large amounts pulled out regularly over the past 8 months, always in round numbers. 500 here, 1,000 there, 2,000 the week before Ashley's deployment. Someone had been systematically draining her grandmother's life savings. Ashley grabbed Grandma's phone and scrolled through the call log. She expected to find regular check-ins from family members, proof that someone had been monitoring the situation. Instead, she found something that made her sick to her stomach. The last call from her parents? 3 weeks ago. Lasted 47 seconds. Her brother? 6 weeks ago. 2 minutes. Her cousins, aunts, uncles, the same people posting happy family photos on social media? Some hadn't called in months. Not one of them had bothered to check if the woman who'd raised half of them was even alive. Ashley sat in that empty kitchen, surrounded by unpaid bills and empty pill bottles, and realized she wasn't looking at neglect anymore. This was something far more sinister. Someone had been systematically stealing from a dying woman, isolating her, ensuring no one would notice until it was too late.
And Ashley was starting to have a very clear idea of who. When her parents finally returned from their Hawaiian paradise, Ashley was waiting. She'd spent 3 days caring for her grandmother, restocking the medicine cabinet, filling the refrigerator, trying to undo months of neglect. The confrontation happened right there in Grandma's living room, with the old woman sleeping fitfully in the next room. Ashley laid out everything: the unpaid medical bills, the empty bank account, the months without phone calls. She expected shock, maybe guilt, certainly an explanation. Instead, her mother just shrugged and said Grandma was old, that she didn't really need all those expensive medications anyway. Her father nodded along, more concerned about his sunburn than the fact that his mother-in-law had been slowly dying while they sipped margaritas. But it was her brother who delivered the gut punch that Ashley will never forget. When she showed him the bank statements, when she pointed out that thousands of dollars had been systematically stolen from their grandmother's account, he didn't even try to deny it. Instead, he looked Ashley dead in the eye and said the words that would haunt her forever. She's going to die anyway. Why waste money keeping her comfortable when that money could actually be useful to people with a future? The room went silent. Ashley stared at this man who shared her blood, who had been raised by the same grandmother who'd sacrificed everything for their family. He wasn't just admitting to theft, he was admitting he'd written off their grandmother as already dead. Her parents didn't even flinch. They just stood there, tanned and rested from their vacation, nodding as if her brother had said something perfectly reasonable. That's when Ashley realized she was completely alone in this fight. Her family hadn't just abandoned her grandmother, they'd already buried her in their minds. They saw her as nothing more than a financial burden, an inconvenience standing between them and an inheritance. Ashley looked around that room at the people who were supposed to love this woman, who were supposed to protect her, and made a promise that would change everything. If you won't protect her, then I will. And I'm going to make sure the whole world knows exactly what kind of people you really are. Ashley knew she had one weapon her family didn't expect: the truth. And she was about to use it to destroy the carefully crafted image they'd spent years building. She started documenting everything. Photos of the empty refrigerator next to screenshots of her brother's expensive restaurant posts. Pictures of unpaid medical bills scattered across the kitchen table, dated the same week her parents were posting sunset photos from their beachfront hotel. She photographed her grandmother's empty pill organizer right next to her cousin's Instagram story about buying a new designer purse. But the most damning evidence was the timeline. Ashley created a detailed record showing exactly when each family member had last called, last visited, last checked on the woman who'd raised them. Then she cross-referenced it with their social media activity. While Grandma was rationing her heart medication, her brother was posting about his weekend golf trips. While she was sitting alone in that empty house, her parents were sharing romantic dinner photos from Maui. Ashley didn't just post this evidence, she strategically deployed it. She started with the family's church, the same congregation where her grandmother had volunteered for 30 years. The pastor who'd watched her grandmother organize countless charity drives suddenly saw photos of her wasting away, abandoned and forgotten. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Church members who'd known the family for decades started asking hard questions. How could they let this happen? How could they live with themselves? The same people who used to praise her parents for their successful children were now whispering in the pews about elder abuse. Then Ashley took it wider. She posted comparison photos on Facebook, her parents' Hawaiian vacation album, right next to pictures of her grandmother's empty medicine cabinet. The comments section exploded. Extended family members who'd been kept in the dark suddenly understood why they hadn't heard from Grandma in months. Family friends who'd assumed everything was fine realized they'd been watching a woman slowly disappear while her family partied. Within days, her parents' carefully maintained reputation was in ruins. The country club, where they played tennis every weekend, suddenly felt different. Neighbors who used to wave now crossed the street. Their church asked them to step down from the volunteer positions they'd held for years. The perfect family, image her parents had spent decades building, crumbled in less than a week. And Ashley was just getting started. Ashley wasn't satisfied with just destroying their reputation. What her family had done wasn't just morally bankrupt, it was criminal. And she was going to make sure they faced every single consequence the law would allow. She contacted Adult Protective Services first, armed with mountains of documentation. The caseworker who came to investigate took one look at her grandmother's condition, then at the evidence Ashley had compiled, and immediately opened a formal elder abuse investigation. Medical neglect, financial exploitation, emotional abandonment, the charges kept stacking up. But Ashley wanted more than just a government investigation. She hired a lawyer who specialized in elder abuse cases, a woman with a reputation for going scorched earth on families who preyed on their elderly relatives. Together, they built a case that would destroy her family financially and legally. The financial evidence was devastating. Bank records showed that over 18 months, her brother had systematically drained nearly $40,000 from their grandmother's account. He'd used her debit card for everything: luxury vacations, expensive dinners, car payments, even gambling debts. While their grandmother was rationing her medication and eating one meal a day to save money, he was living like a king on her life savings. But he'd gotten sloppy. He'd used her card at ATMs near his house, restaurants he frequented, stores where he was a regular customer. The paper trail was so clear that even his lawyer advised him to settle rather than face criminal charges. The court case was brutal. Ashley's lawyer dragged every detail into the open. Phone records showing months without contact. Medical records proving her grandmother's health had declined dramatically due to missed medications and inadequate nutrition. Financial statements revealing the systematic theft that had left an elderly woman choosing between food and medicine. Her parents tried to claim ignorance, but their own social media posts destroyed their defense. How could they not know their mother was suffering when they were posting vacation photos the same week she was hospitalized for malnutrition? The judge was merciless. He ordered immediate restitution. Every penny stolen had to be returned with interest. Her brother's assets were frozen, his accounts seized. The court placed a lien on her parents' house until the money was repaid. Their financial advisor testified that they had the means to care for their elderly relative, but chose to spend the money on themselves instead. But the legal victory Ashley treasured most was gaining full power of attorney over her grandmother's care. No more family meetings where they could outvote her. No more financial decisions made by people who saw their grandmother as a burden. Ashley now had legal authority to ensure her grandmother would never be abandoned again. Her brother tried to contest it, claiming as the oldest son he had traditional rights to make family decisions. The judge shut him down with words that made Ashley smile for the first time in months. "Sir, you've proven yourself unfit to care for a houseplant, let alone a vulnerable elderly person. This court grants full guardianship to the granddaughter who actually cares, whether this woman lives or dies." The legal fees alone cost her family over $30,000. The restitution was twice that. The liens on their property meant they couldn't refinance, couldn't sell, couldn't make any major financial moves without court approval. Ashley had effectively trapped them in a financial prison of their own making. But she still wasn't finished. The criminal charges were still pending, and Ashley intended to push for the maximum sentence allowed by law. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Within 6 months, Ashley's family had gone from respected pillars of their community to social outcasts that people crossed the street to avoid. Her parents' mortgage company, alerted by the court proceedings, discovered they'd been lying about their financial situation for years. The liens placed on their property triggered a review of their loan terms, and suddenly their comfortable suburban home was in foreclosure. The country club where her father had played golf for 20 years quietly suggested he might be more comfortable elsewhere. Her mother's book club, her volunteer positions at the hospital, her standing coffee dates with neighbors, all of it evaporated as word spread about what they'd done to their own family. Her brother faced the worst consequences. The criminal charges stuck. Financial exploitation of an elderly person, a felony that carried serious prison time. His employer, a respected accounting firm, terminated him immediately when the charges became public. His wife, horrified by what she discovered about the man she'd married, filed for divorce and took their children. The house he'd been so proud of, the one partially paid for with his grandmother's stolen money, went into foreclosure when he could no longer make the payments from his jail cell. But for all the legal victories, Ashley knew the clock was ticking. Her grandmother's health had been severely compromised by months of neglect. The malnutrition, the missed medications, the stress of abandonment, it had all taken a toll that couldn't be completely undone. Ashley made the decision that would define the rest of her life. She moved her grandmother into her own small apartment, transforming her living room into a makeshift care facility. She learned to administer medications, monitor vital signs, coordinate with doctors and specialists. The VA benefits from her military service helped, but most of Ashley's savings went toward creating a safe, comfortable environment where her grandmother could spend her remaining time surrounded by love instead of neglect. The next 8 months were the most challenging and rewarding of Ashley's life. She watched her grandmother slowly regain some strength, some dignity, some joy in living. They spent hours looking through old photo albums, talking about family history, sharing stories Ashley had never heard before. Her grandmother taught her recipes that had been passed down for generations, traditions that would have died with her if she'd been left alone in that empty house. There were difficult days, days when the pain was overwhelming, when the medications weren't enough, when Ashley wondered if she was strong enough to handle this responsibility. But every morning, she'd see her grandmother's face light up when she walked into the room, and she knew she'd made the right choice. Her grandmother passed away on a Tuesday morning in spring, holding Ashley's hand, surrounded by flowers from the church members who'd never forgotten her kindness over the years. She was clean, comfortable, pain-free, and most importantly, loved. Her final words were a whispered, "Thank you," to the granddaughter who'd refused to let her die alone and forgotten. The funeral was a study in contrasts. The church was packed with people whose lives her grandmother had touched, former students she'd tutored, families she'd helped during hard times, church members she'd quietly supported for decades. Her parents and surviving family members sat in the back, isolated and alone, their presence tolerated but not welcomed. Ashley stood at the podium and spoke about dignity, about loyalty, about the difference between being family by blood and being family by choice. She talked about a woman who'd worked 3 jobs to keep her family afloat, who'd sacrificed everything for people who saw her as nothing more than a burden when she needed them most. But she also talked about redemption, about the 8 months they'd had together at the end, about the peace her grandmother had found in knowing that someone had fought for her when it mattered most. In her closing words, Ashley made a promise that echoed through that packed church. She taught me that family isn't about what people can give you. It's about what you're willing to give them when they can't give anything back. And if you're not willing to give everything to protect the people who protected you, then you're not family at all. You're just strangers who happen to share the same blood. Sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought on foreign soil with guns and grenades. Sometimes they're fought in quiet hospital rooms and empty kitchens, against enemies who share your DNA and once shared your dinner table. Ashley learned that the hardest war to fight isn't against strangers in a distant country. It's against the people you thought you could trust with your life. This story forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about family, loyalty, and what we owe the people who shaped us. Ashley's grandmother had given everything to raise a family that ultimately saw her as nothing more than a financial burden. She'd worked multiple jobs, sacrificed her own comfort, invested her life savings in people who were willing to let her die alone when she was no longer useful to them. But it also shows us what real love looks like when everything else falls away. When reputation doesn't matter, when money is tight, when caring for someone requires genuine sacrifice with no reward except knowing you did the right thing. Ashley chose to honor the woman who'd raised her, even when it meant going to war with everyone else she'd once called family. The question that haunts the story is whether forgiveness is even possible after a betrayal this deep. Can you ever trust someone again after they've proven they're willing to let you die for money? Is blood really thicker than water when that blood belongs to people who would rather count coins than count the days you have left? Ashley made her choice. She chose justice over family harmony, truth over comfortable lies, her grandmother's dignity over her own relationships with people who'd proven they didn't deserve her loyalty. But that choice came with a price she'll pay for the rest of her life. Holidays spent alone, family photos with faces missing, the knowledge that when she needs help, she truly has no one left to call. What would you have done in Ashley's position? Would you have found a way to forgive your family and try to rebuild those relationships? Or would you have burned every bridge to protect someone who couldn't protect themselves? Would you have been satisfied with the legal victory, or would you have wanted them to suffer the way they made your grandmother suffer? And here's the harder question. If you discovered your own family was capable of this kind of cruelty, would you be strong enough to stand alone against all of them? Would you sacrifice your own future financial security and family connections to do what's right for someone who might not live to see the consequences? If this story made you think about the people in your own life who've sacrificed for you, hit that like button. If it made you grateful for family members who would never abandon you, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss these stories. And if it made you angry enough that you want to share it with someone who needs to hear it, please do. Sometimes these stories reach exactly the person who needs to hear them most. Next time, we're diving into a wedding disaster that'll make you question whether you really know the person you're about to marry. Picture this: a bride walking down the aisle, everything perfect, everyone smiling, until she spots her groom's phone buzzing with messages from the woman he's been sleeping with for months. What happens next will make you believe in instant karma and remind you why some people deserve exactly what they get.